trying to solve the right problem sounds like asking a lot of questions and figuring out which question to ask. Do you have like a mental model or to kind of approach this?
Absolutely, yeah. There's one thing that really separates amazing designers from good designers. And I think that's being curious. I think you find that the best people at like solving problems or understanding problems are the people who are like constantly questioning and constantly being curious about things. So if I go back and thinking of myself when working like as a founding designer with startups, I've always been curious about everything. And I see something in designers and it really makes a difference. So stakeholder says something, a commercial person or a marketing person, you're asking, oh, why? Tell me more about this. Like, let me understand this. What have we done in the past around this? What problems are you facing in your area? Maybe a researcher mentioned something. It all starts from being really curious about everything you're hearing and not just taking it at face value. I think that is number one before we mention any kind of framework or mental model. I always go very simple. I always try and ask a number of questions. What do you think is the problem? Let's start with that because often it's like, oh, we need to do a redesign of this feature. And you're like, what is the problem? Right? So we start really basic. What do you think are we solving here? Then what is the user that is being affected by this? And what are other stakeholders around this? What data do we have about this problem? Is this just your assumption or is this based on something? And by the way, I'm happy with problems that come from hunches and assumptions. Like it is part of the work that we do. And sometimes understanding how much data you have on a problem, and that data can be quant or qual data. So have we done any research on this? Gathering all the data that you have around a problem is probably one of the most impactful and essential things to do. And yet it's almost never done right because we always say we need to move quickly. So let's quickly design a solution. And then there's so much data that we're leaving behind. There's other teams in our business that have done like reports and research and gathered evidence on this, but we're not using it. So what data do we have? And then if we go towards kind of like the solution side of the problem, have we tried anything in the past to solve this? Have other businesses tried things? How are they solving it? Do we have any suggested solutions? And then extremely important, what are we hoping to do if we solve it? So let's say everything goes right. How do we know if we're successful? Because obviously you can't judge something like the success of an initiative by completed this or we did some interviews. The success of an initiative is, did it move the business metric? Did it make us learn something? And I'll actually stick to the last one because obviously there's a lot of talk around measuring impact and making sure that everything has like a sizable impact. It's not always about the impact because not everything you do is successful, but it's also about the learning. So sometimes it's also important to say, well, you know what? This problem is defined by answering these questions. Well, one of these things is what are we going to learn if we do this? And maybe that is how we're successful. Maybe we didn't move the business metric, but we're actually very successful because we actually learned one, two, three things that will make our next initiative very impactful. So yeah, that's where I would start. Like, what is the problem? What is the evidence that we have? What kind of data do we have, qual or quant? What is the audience that is being affected by this, either directly or indirectly? What are other companies doing around this, or what have we done in the past? What are the suggested solutions? How do we measure success if all goes well?
That was so good. Oh god. It reminds me of the experience canvas from Atlassian, where it's like this
Yeah.
real simple one pager where you basically divide it into quadrants and problem ideas, value stakeholders, team, personas, and test ideas or data to back it. And that's a really healthy way to just like, can you brain dump on like a one pager that's like really easy and quick to share? But it also sounds like there's so much up work, even deciding. And you mentioned that most of the times we're expected to run fast. How does this play out in day-to-day life at work where it's like there's so much to consider, but then at one point sometimes there could be some analysis paralysis? How do you kind of solve for that?
I think that's such a great question. This has been tormenting me my whole career. I think there's a couple of things here. The first and most important thing, especially for junior or mid-level people that are listening to this, is like there's no perfect process around this, and there's no perfect expectation of what you need to get at each step of the process. And that doesn't just apply with like defining problems, it applies to every single thing that you're doing in design, right? With discovery, with defining, with ideating, with design. So for starters, you don't need to get everything right. You just need to make sure sure that you're covering some of the essentials. The second thing that I would say is it sounds overwhelming at first, but if you build that curiosity, this becomes a conversation that you can have with someone in like 5 to 10 minutes. That's why I stress so much that you don't have to do this in a whiteboard. If you make a habit of asking a PM, a stakeholder, your team of like the best people that are going to work on this problem, like those 7 things before you start working on anything, this becomes second language. And you build the second language over years and years and years of trying to do this again. And the first time you do it, it feels awkward and it feels uncomfortable and it might even feel a bit mechanical. But then the second and the third and the 10th time you're doing this, it almost becomes a, let me just take 10 minutes to make sure we'll align on these things. Now, to cover the most challenging bits, sometimes you don't have answers to all of these questions. And that's completely fine. Maybe you haven't done research on something. It's okay to say, you know what? I'm getting answers to 3 of these 7 questions, and that's better than getting answers to none of these questions. So being okay with that imperfection so that you're able to move fast is, I think, something that is really important for every designer. I think most designers that I see struggle a lot with imperfection in the process, and they say, oh, we haven't answered all of these things. The truth is, there's never a perfect process, and being able to have that sense of what is really important for you and for the business, and then moving on and saying, that's good enough, let's figure out the next thing. I think this is what's really important. I think the last thing that I'm going to mention, because obviously you mentioned things like speed. Who doesn't like speed, right? And so imagine if you're a business stakeholder and they're like, hey, we need to really move fast and build something that works. And the designer goes like, oh, no, hold up. We have a process to follow here. I need 3 weeks of doing discovery. We're going to come up with some ideas. In a month or 2 months from now, we're going to have something. That's a no-go, right? I think being able to say, you know what, from the 50 things that I've learned in this boot camp that I did, actually there's 5 or 6 things that really make a difference. And those things are never the same. And so I'm going to focus on these things when I'm pushed for speed. That's what's really important. And then there's other times where people might push for speed and you might be able to say, hey, if we do this very, very fast, it's very unlikely we're going to succeed because it's not a problem we know enough about. We haven't done any research. It's a new problem that we can't really take inspiration from other businesses. So actually, I think we should take more time. I think that balance of saying, I need to do this at a very fast pace, but I still have enough to do this, so I'm okay with imperfection, versus I don't have enough time to do this and I need to spend more time on it because I don't understand this problem enough. That's really difficult to build. But I would always say you are the person that always knows what's important based on what are the areas you have most confidence in. If you're very confident that this is the right problem, then yeah, maybe you don't need to redo interviews or redo surveys, like go straight into solutionizing. If you don't, then yeah, take more time to do this piece of work because otherwise it's very unlikely you're going to be successful.
When you coach your team and designers out there, how do you think about adaptability and how do you suggest designers on this call kind of work on?
This is a topic I'm very passionate about. There's a couple of things to being adaptable. I think firstly,
want to listen to the full conversation? Click the video on screen now. Subscribe to the channel if you want to join us live. Oh, wait. Okay, fine, you don't have to join us for the live stream, but if you like stuff like this, then click that subscribe button. I'll see you on the inside. Bye!